Today's dive is on the Onondaga, once a mighty ship of 2,690 tons, 275 feet in length, and a beam of 49.1 feet. Today, it is just wreckage, almost unrecognizable as a ship on the ocean floor. Located in Watch Hill, Westerly, Rhode Island. Most don't know that German subs patrolled our coast during World War I. They did, and the Onondaga is one of their casualties. Albeit without a torpedo ever being fired. June 18th, 1918. She was en route from Boston to Charleston, South Carolina, with cargo consisting of narrow gauge tires, shoe heels known as cat paws, bottles, and china. When leaving Cape Cod, she was ordered to change route by the U.S. Coast Guard due to the threat of German U-boats. She was to go through the Long Island Sound in between Connecticut and Long Island, rather than around Long Island on the ocean side. It was around 10 p.m. The Onondaga was navigating in heavy fog. Her captain had mistook the light from the Watch Hill Lighthouse as being Race Rock Light, so he accidentally put the ship into shallow water, thinking it was deep. The crew heard noises coming from the hull. The ship had hit a reef. As it scraped over the rocks, it split open her seams of the hull, allowing water to come in. The ship then sunk in deeper water. It only took about 15 minutes for her to hit the ocean bottom. Thankfully, all 31 sailors made it into the ship's 2 lifeboats. One of the lifeboats almost sank due to it being punctured when lowered. Thankfully, personnel from the Watch Hill life-saving station then brought all the men to safety. Originally, when she first sank, they thought that they could potentially refloat her, but then they figured out that this was impossible due to much of the hull being missing. However, a lot of the ship's superstructure still protruded out of the water during low tide. For this reason, it was deemed as a hazard to navigation and blown up, leaving us with all this rubble, almost unidentifiable as a ship here on the ocean bottom. Today, the Onondaga lies in about 35 to 45 feet of water, the stern in about 55 feet. The visibility here is usually good, but the currents are extremely strong and can be dangerous. It's essential to dive this wreck at slack tide, and you have about an hour before the tide picks up again. Again, it can be extremely dangerous here due to these tides. It's recommended that you have someone in the boat waiting, just in case you got swept away, because it is a possibility here. With that being said, the Onondaga is an awesome dive. It's full of marine life, a lot of giant tautog, there's cunner everywhere, it's possible to see bluefish and striped bass. The wreck is covered by anemones. You really don't know what type of marine life you might see. This wreck is a haven for different types of marine life. They come here in the strong current and find refuge. This also attracts fishermen, and a diver must be cognizant of the fact that there's a lot of tanglement in hazards. Fishing line, ropes, crab pots. You have to watch out to not get tangled in the strong currents. A dive knife is essential. Gary Gentile's dive book, Shipwrecks of Rhode Island and Connecticut, has a passage about the Onondaga that goes into detail about its history. I will now read from this book. On January 13th, 1907, the Onondaga departed from Boston, Massachusetts. She was bound for Charleston, South Carolina, thence to Jacksonville, Florida. She proceeded only as far as Orleans Beach in Massachusetts when she ran upon a sandbar. She grounded easily with barely a lurch. Her hull was undamaged by the soft sandy bottom, but the rapidly ebbing tide left her high and dry. There was no immediate danger, so the officers and crew remained on board. The following day, the Coast Guard cutter Gresham made an ineffectual attempt to pull her off the beach. It is planned tomorrow to send a big anchor off from the STR, and if possible, warp the vessel off with the assistance of another line from the Gresham. Tugs, Underwriter, Mercury, and Orion were unable to get hawsers to the STR today and proceed to Vineyard Haven, where extra gear will be taken aboard and another effort made when weather moderates. 200 tons of cargo were offloaded during the next 3 days. At flood tide on January 17th, the combined efforts of the cutter and the 3 salvage tugs dragged the Onondaga 12 feet towards the open sea. On January 18th, the fourfold towing effort managed to pull the vessel's bow around so that it pointed offshore. Lightering the cargo continued until the Onondaga was completely unloaded. The freight was piled high on the beach. Still, the tugs were unable to free the hull from the grip of the sand. Salvage attempts endured intermediately for the next 2 months. Sometimes the tugs would gain a little headway, only to have the Onondaga slip back towards the shore after the change of tide. Winter storms interceded and retarded salvage operations. The vessel gained seaway one day, then lost the gain the next. It was a frustrating exercise for all involved, and an expensive one for the insurance underwriters. In early March, the hay and less valuable cargo were sold at auction. The amount of money realized went unreported. Every time the salvage tugs managed to gain some headway in hauling the Onondaga towards sea, something occurred to prevent the vessel from floating free. Storms, adverse tides, and broken hawsers too numerous to mention. Not until March 14th, 2 months after her initial grounding, did the Onondaga float off the bar. She was then towed to Boston for temporary repairs on March 22nd. The Onondaga departed once again from Boston, both under tow from the tug Underwriter and under partial head of steam. Tug and tow proceeded to the yard at which Onondaga was constructed, William Cramp and Sons, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. There she was, completely overhauled. The bountiful career of the Onondaga lasted for another 11 years. Then, on June 29, 1918, with a strange sense of deja vu, she departed from Boston, bound for Charlestown and Jacksonville. Once again, she lost her way. The Onondaga was built in 1905. She was owned by the Clyde Steamship Company, who named all of their fleet of coastal steamers after Indian tribes. The Onondaga Nation, known as People of the Hills, are a sovereign indigenous people who are located near Syracuse, New York. Sometimes when I'm using my GoPro, I accidentally hit time-lapse instead of recording a video, and that's what happened here, but still wanted to include this footage. This is the bow section of the wreck. The Clyde Line dates back to 1872, when it was established in New York. They expanded around all of the East and Gulf Coast. They also went to the West Indies. Onondaga was typical of their steel hull ships at the time. Many of these ships had lacked modern navigation instruments. Out of the 45 ships owned by the Clyde Line, 16 had wrecked before the company sold in 1949. While the ship has been blown up, and over the years, sea surges have made its hull almost unrecognizable, looking like scattered wreckage among the sea floor. But, to this day, artifacts have still been found. Some divers have found old tires, shoe heels, newspaper pulp, spinning wheel fixtures, cups, perfume bottles, shoes, and plates, normally buried in the sand right around the wreck. This piece of steel sticking out at its furthest point is all that remains of the bow. Working its way back, you can start to see one of the sides of its hull. If you look closely, a huge tautog swims under for refuge. This is the ship's stern. I now start to work my way back towards the bow, where the mooring line is, leading back to my boat. Navigating around the wreck can be disorienting, as a lot of the metal plates all look like each other. It was a relief to finally find the bow again, as I had gotten mixed up for a second. The currents were really starting to pick up now, and it's really humbling to feel how vulnerable you are out there in the open ocean. These currents can be so strong that you can't swim against them, and who knows where you might end up. Here's the line leading back to the mooring line. now grab onto the line. The current's so strong that if I wasn't holding on, I might be pushed away. And I begin my ascent. Do my safety stop, and then I'm back at the surface. Back at the surface, it's a foggy day, much like that day of the ill-fated trip of the Onondaga.